Welcome back to our Sunday night MSNBC special on impeachment, which is now hitting a critical new phase. Congress voting on impeachment rules, which were opposed by every House Republican, also bringing America closer to a trial in the Senate. One independent did back Thursday's vote, Congressman Justice Mash, who recently left the GOP over this issue.
I think it's really important that we do our job as a Congress, that we not allow misconduct to go undeterred, that we not just say someone can violate the public trust and that there are no consequences to it.
Mash discussing consequences for Trump, but Republicans who even criticize the president have faced their own consequences. Another Republican congressman, described as being open to the process of impeachment, drew such heat that he quickly walked it back. But when members of the president's party do turn, it can change everything. Nixon had a firewall of Republican support for years. Many thought it would hold. But when House Republicans turned and made a public case against him in the impeachment probe, it was devastating.
The misuse of power is the very essence of tyranny. But the evidence is clear and direct and convincing to me. My present inclination is to support articles incorporating my view as to the charges of obstruction of justice and abuse of power. But there will be no joy in it for me.
I cannot, in good conscience, turn away from the evidence of evil that is, to me, so clear and compelling.
Impeachment is, of course, a yes or no vote. But there's also a spectrum between, say, total defense, criticism, and then impeaching. Bill Clinton found his own party was very publicly critical of his conduct, even as most did not say it was ultimately an impeachable high crime. He was rebuked, condemned. Some even pushed a formal censure for, quote, shameful, reckless, and indefensible behavior.
The transgressions the president has admitted to are too consequential for us to walk away. It is immoral, and it is harmful.
We do not condone the shame that he has brought on the White House.
All those stained and tainted and, if you will, rebuked, which will be forever with his legacy. It will be memorialized in history.
These actions warrant condemnation.
Those were Democrats on the president's political team, and the impeachment process moved many to draw a line against that conduct, even as most did not endorse impeachment. That was a political climate that ultimately drew more public admissions from President Clinton.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. I must put it right, and I am prepared to do whatever it takes to do so. Nothing is more important to me personally, but it is private, and I intend to reclaim my family life for my family. It's nobody's business but ours.
The Senate acquitted Clinton by a wide margin, but it was after 31 House Democrats backed his initial impeachment inquiry. 28 Democrats in the Senate also backed censure. Today, Republicans remain more united around Trump. The question is whether public hearings will change that as they did for Nixon. And partisanship is not the only driver here. Some Republicans who served in Congress say their vote for impeachment was ultimately a mistake. And the more serious evidence against Trump nowadays puts the contrast from the Clinton era in relief.
In retrospect, it was a mistake to impeach Bill Clinton because, the substance of the matter really wasn't all that essential to the nation. The allegations against President Trump are really far more serious. They involve abuse of power, abuse of the office.
Experts agree the Constitution treats abuse of the office rather than other, perhaps serious transgressions as the strongest rationale to impeach. You remove from office the person abusing the office. And someone has to go first if you're ever going to make that argument against your own party, against the powerful person in office. So we want to tell you tonight as we dig in here, the first Republican to actually do that against Nixon, do you remember who it was? Congressman Larry Hogan Sr. He was punished for it. Hogan helped start the fire. Nixon famously left office. But then Hogan's political career ended just a month later. Not in a general election where most people agreed with him, but in a partisan Republican primary. So it's notable that all these years later, it's Hogan's son carrying on the tradition. Governor Larry Hogan Jr. is one of the few elected Republicans backing the impeachment probe, one of just 3 Republican governors.
I think we do need an inquiry because we got to get to the bottom of it. I'm not ready to say I support impeachment and the removal of the president, but I think I do think we have to have an impeachment inquiry. I don't see any other way to get to the facts.
And what do today's Republicans think of the facts that are known? Well, Senator Jeff Flake served in the Senate in the time of the Trump era as a Republican. He says his colleagues already do want to impeach if they could just do so without the public blowback we've just been documenting.
Somebody mentioned yesterday that if there were a private vote, that there'd be 30 Republican votes. That's not true. There'd be at least 35, or maybe more if it were a private vote, but that's not possible. And so they have to come out, and many of them are up for re-election in tough seats, and I know that feeling.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.